Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news from the WordPress community. Now, welcome your hosts, David Wormsley and Nathan Wrigley.
Hello there and welcome to the WP Builds podcast once again. This is episode number 145 entitled, Should We Use Templates More? It was published on Thursday the 12th of September 2019. My name's Nathan Wrigley from pictureandword.co.uk, a small web development agency based in the north of England, and today I will be joined by David Wormsley from davidwormsley.com because you may or may not have noticed that we alternate. Usually we do an interview one week with somebody in the WordPress space, perhaps a plugin developer or somebody who has something interesting to say about WordPress, and then the following week we do a discussion with David and I, and it's one of those weeks today, so we'll catch up with him later. But before we begin that, just a few things to say. If you wouldn't mind following onto some links, what I'm trying to do is trying to get you involved in the WP Builds community. If you're a WordPresser, we've got a whole heap of stuff going on. So head over to the wpbuilds.com website, wpbuilds.com/subscribe. You can find the link in the top menu, and over there you're going to find a whole bunch of ways for keeping in touch. For example, there's 2 newsletters to sign up to. There is ways that you can connect with us on your podcast player of choice. There's our Facebook group of 2,200 WordPressers giving some helpful tips and advice. There's Twitter, YouTube, and so on and so forth, so go check that out. The other one that I'd like to mention is wpbuilds.com/deals. It's a bit like Black Friday, but every day of the week. We have an increasingly growing selection of coupon codes for WordPress products. We've added a few recently, so go and check that out if you're in the market for something WordPressy. You never know, you might be able to get yourself some cash off. And also wpbuilds.com/advertise. If you are a product owner or you have a service which would benefit by being put in front of our audience, then please do go to that page and get in touch, a bit like these guys did. The WP Builds podcast is brought to you today by Cloudways. This episode is sponsored by Cloudways, which is a managed cloud-based hosting platform for WordPress. Unlike others, they let you choose the server from top cloud providers like Google Cloud, Amazon, and DigitalOcean. And there are no restrictions on the number of websites per server. Try Cloudways using the promo code WPBuilds and get $20 free hosting credit. And WP Feedback. Are client communications eating up all of your time? If so, check out WP Feedback. It's a visual feedback tool for WordPress that is specifically designed to get you and your clients on the same page. Check out wpfeedback.co. And the Page Builder Framework. Do you use a page builder to create your websites? The Page Builder Framework is a mobile, responsive, and lightning-fast WordPress theme that works with Beaver Builder, Elementor, Breezy, and other page builders. With its endless customization options in the WordPress Customizer, it's the perfect fit for you or your agency. Go to wp-pagebuilderframework.com today. And we thank all of our lovely sponsors for keeping the WP Builds podcast going. I really do appreciate it very much indeed. Okay, what are we talking about today? Well, David Wormsley and I today are talking about templates. Wind the clock back a long time, and websites were really difficult to work with. You know, before CSS, you had to do everything in tables. Then CSS came along, and it was a little bit easier. And then you got CMSs like WordPress, and you had themes, and it made it a little bit more easy. But still, you would have to develop the theme, and that was quite hard. And then what about the themes that you bought? Because sometimes they beguilingly sold you lots of options, and only upon purchasing them and downloading them and using them did you realize that, oh, this is going to be more work than I thought, getting it to do what I needed. And then page builders came along, and we had rows and modules and ways to save the rows that we created. And so the question is now, should we be using these facilities? Should we be using downloadable templates that fit in with page builders? Should we be using services like Dear Designer and things like that? Or should we be building up our own unique, bespoke, completely personalized set of templates that we use? And it's an interesting discussion. As always, David and I sort of flit around the subject, and I hope that you enjoy this week's podcast.
Today, we're asking ourselves, should we be using templates more? So I wanted to talk to Nathan about this because just recently I started making my own template library. And this is after years of really believing that we should build sites from the ground up based on clients' aims. So in some ways, I'm kind of just checking that I'm going the right way. Nathan, what do you think? Is making templates a good idea?
I think it's totally fine, especially in the way that you're doing it. You know, the idea that you're creating your own templates. I think that's really admirable. We'll get onto the whole purchasing of templates and all of that later, but I can't see why not. And it from all the discussions that we've had over the years, it doesn't sound to me like you're going to be getting a template, throwing that in front of a client and saying it's finished. You know, I've done your website. It took me all of 8 seconds because I clicked a couple of buttons and it was done. No, I think it's fine. And honestly, I think this is the way that the industry's going. So, yeah.
Yeah, it does seem to be that. Do you know what? It's such good fun, though, making these templates, especially when you're just kind of borrowing other people's ideas and just best fun you can have, I think, with your clothes on. And to be honest, I don't, tend to have my clothes on. So it's a double bonus.
This is going to be a fruity episode, I can see. So where did all this begin? How did we get to the point where templates were even a thing?
Yeah, well, I think it's really interesting because we're in the WordPress space, and I'm kind of looking back over the history a bit because, when it started, it was just a blogging platform. Bloggers pretty much need the same kind of thing. So they could just start blogging and get somebody else's design. It seemed to make a lot of sense. And I'm sure WordPress is as popular as it is today because, you could have a beautiful looking site very easily that you could use. And I think it's only when we get later down the line where it becomes more of a content management system and professionals are on board that in the same space as WordPress, you get this division, don't you, between those people who off-the-shelf designs and those people like us who are making a profession out of building sites for people, and we want to use WordPress as a tool to do that.
Yeah.
And so I think when that comes in, I think we've got that division between the likes of monster templates and theme forest, and then we've got the difference between them and say something like the frameworks that we used to have, Genesis, which I used, and there's Woo Themes, his own canvas, which has gone now, and there was Headway, which has also gone. So what happened with you, Nathan? Where did you start?
Well, it's interesting because I was just thinking about that conversation because obviously if you go back a number of years, I wasn't using WordPress at all.
Yeah.
And but I had an eye on places like Envato because design wasn't and still isn't my area of strength, and so the idea of going and looking at other people's designs and sort of thinking, that setup works really well in that environment for that purpose and so on. So I'd find myself on Theme Forest a lot, and I think we all did. It was a bit of an old adage, wasn't it, that you would buy hundreds of these themes and most of them would sit gathering dust. But at that point I was using Drupal, and Drupal, it's fair to say, if you are into the templating system of Drupal, it could produce an equally beautiful theme. But I think the difference, what drew me to WordPress in the end was the groundswell of support for WordPress, the fact that so many people were using it. And primarily, I think that's because the UI of the admin area was so much more easy to use and so much more well thought out and beautifully created. So WordPress's capability to make things easy on the back end led to a resurgence, well, not a resurgence, an upswell of people creating themes through it. And then it was a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. It got more popular and more popular. And then when I came to WordPress and I'd finally made the decision, it felt to me as if we were already right in the middle of a tipping point, because I know that there were there's a history of WordPress, especially when it began. It was difficult, like all CMSs, many years ago, to create these templates. You had to have an understanding of using an IDE, and you had to understand PHP and possibly a bit of JavaScript and certainly CSS, and you had to be able to wrangle those template files and put everything in the right place and plan it all very carefully. And it would take hours and hours and hours to get very little back. And then, as you described, things like Genesis came along and made that whole process somewhat easier, although still probably out of the realm of non-technical users, the 80% of WordPress users who are just logging in each day and creating content. So I skirted around with, in fact, I bought the full Genesis license. I can't remember what it was, but it was fairly costly. It was $400 or $500 or something, and started playing with that. And it was during my time playing with Genesis that I came across page builders, because they were just starting to make some inroads into the whole difficulty of creating pages. But at that point, they were already good enough that I could see the benefit of doing it. You were kind of limited into rows typically. You have a row of content and so on. But again, that fitted the template model very well as well, because you could obviously create a template of rows. So that's my journey with it. So in terms of WordPress, I don't really have the heritage, but I can give you many horror stories of trying to template in Drupal. And I don't know to this day if Drupal has an equivalent of Beaver Builder or Elementor. I expect they do, but I don't suppose it's developed quite as much because of the fact that there's a smaller user base.
Yes, there is that, and it attracts different people. I mean, I remember Drupal was too much for me. I considered I didn't have the developer chops to manage something like that, and stuck with WordPress. But at the time, Drupal really was the one to go for if you were serious about it.
Yeah, and I think to some extent it still has that feel about it. It can do terribly complicated things, but WordPress caught up in terms of its CMS capabilities, to the point where it was kind of indistinguishable, really. And I would say that that's probably the case now. What you could do in WordPress, you can do in Drupal, and vice versa. But the ecosystem that's grown up around WordPress is far, how to describe it? It's bigger. Let's say that it's certainly a lot bigger. So there's a lot more choice. So did you play a lot with things like Genesis and Headway and Woo Themes Canvas and things like that?
Yeah. Well, Genesis was, when I kind of got more professional, that was my tool for 5 years, and that was it. I mean, I started doing the theme forest thing, trying to select these fabulous looking themes that appeared to do everything I wanted, and millions of options. I didn't realize it at the time, but quickly did, that most of them were very bloated because of all those options that they had. And it was always the same. I couldn't actually get them to do the one thing I wanted, so it was more painful. So I thought, well, there's no getting around this. If I'm going to do this seriously and build these kind of, I think I was moved by the argument where you really should design this around clients' aims. So you should build from the ground upwards. And I thought, well, then I need a proper tool. And because I'm not a developer, obviously in WordPress, we've got people who can just build their own themes for their clients, or maybe use something like underscores, but I wasn't that person. So I had to have Genesis, and that was it. And it's really only page builders that changed everything, because I think there was a division. You were either a Genesis person and you were going to do it seriously and put some effort into it, and you could design what you liked. You could also cheat with some child themes, but that's by the by. And then you had those people who would buy ready-made themes to go. We were probably the majority, don't you think, of people in the WordPress space.
Yeah, but, you mean in terms of the ones that bought Genesis, or the ones that bought pre-made themes that pretended to do everything?
I think the numbers for something like the combined numbers of a place like Theme Forest compared to the combined numbers of those frameworks we had, the Woo one and the Genesis and Headways, I think without a doubt the numbers would be so much higher, wouldn't they, for Theme Forest? So the minority of professionals, I guess, would be, or semi-pros who would be using that stuff. But I think what's interesting with page builders now is that why I've switched and why I've also moved to templating is that, unlike before, you'd really pick your theme depending on your needs as a DIYer or a pro or semi-pro. Now you can use the same page builder, can't you? With, both can.
I remember the frustration, because I did buy some WordPress themes from Envato, Theme Forest, and I did the same for Drupal actually, with the misguided understanding that what I was seeing on the page would make my life easier. Oh, look, that's great. They've got this fabulous portfolio. I could repurpose that portfolio into, I don't know, real estate or something like that. And then as you described, the one thing that you needed it to do, that was a constant frustration. You would try these things and then have very little understanding of how to alter what needed to be altered to make it do what you wanted to do. And so there was a moment in time, and I'm sure that a lot of us can identify with this, because I do remember people talking about just constantly clicking refresh in Theme Forest, just going and buying another theme because it now seemed to do what you needed actually. I've learned that theme didn't work in the way I wanted. Okay, this one over here looks good. And I'm sure that Envato probably made quite a lot of money from people simply buying things on the hope that it would work. But it was always a kind of lack of documentation, really. Never came with the necessary documentation to explain what it is that I needed to do. Primarily because it meant that you had to go back and do the theme again. And of course, if you're starting to fiddle with the theme, really at that point, like you decided, you needed to invest time in learning how themes worked and not assuming that you could buy the solution. And then the page builders came along, and I felt that was a real sea change, because suddenly, for the first time, I could really achieve what I wanted to do in a very, very short space of time. And then with the advent of, the ability to alter headers and footers and so on, and really take over the entire website with a page builder, that moment changed everything for me. And I thought, well, this is how I'm going to do it going forwards until something significantly better comes along, which it hasn't yet.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you've touched on a thing that really tipped it for me, and that is, well, it was for us, Beaver Builder introducing Beaver Themer, which allowed you to to actually style with the page builder all the dynamic areas, because I think I was still a little bit anti-template up until that came out, because there was always still the same issue that everybody had. You couldn't get your header to do what you wanted it to do. That used to waste so much time. A client would want something slightly different in their header, and you would still need to do that with your theme, and it would still be quite problematic.
I still have to deal with a lot of the fallout of that on a kind of more or less weekly basis, where somebody will want to change something, not necessarily a menu item, but I don't know, I'll have inserted a telephone number or something next to the menu, and trying to, the client, well, I can't, how on earth do I do that? Well, you can't. I'll do it. It's just, because it's just not sensible. It doesn't make sense. But with a page builder, okay, well, you just click on the phone number and retype it. Now you're done. Okay, good.
Yeah. And anyway, I think that's just the switch for me. I mean, I think there's still an argument out there. There's always going to be those clients who are just going to need you to build their solution from the ground up. They're really going to need to go through a proper design process where we start with the aims and everything gets wireframed, and that we have mood boards for the sort of look and the branding and all that kind of stuff. But I just think my market is increasingly dominated by all of the kind of big players out there, Wix, Weebly, Squarespace, and then those people providing the service like Yell.com or Hibu. And if I don't move into that area and have my own templates, I think, I'm not going to be able to offer some quick solutions for people that they're already, I believe, expecting to see.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The advertising spend of these companies, particularly Wix and Squarespace, have kind of, I think, changed the agenda for clients, because they now have the impression that, well, let's go back 5 years. I need a website. I have absolutely no idea what to do. Would have been typical of most people, because nobody was advertising how to, certainly not visually, in video form, how to throw a website together. And now, television adverts, internet adverts on YouTube, where a lot of people consume their content, so they see a lot of these adverts. You see a Wix chap sitting at a desk and clicks a button and taps away for a few seconds and look, oh great, look, there's my image, fabulous, and I'll just change the title and I'll drag this thing here, and look, now my title's much bigger, that's fabulous. And so the expectation from clients is that now this is how you build websites. Look, you just log in and use your mouse a bit and click save a few times and it's done. Whereas 5 years ago, there was no way in, and now there's a significant way in. So I think page builders, for WordPress at least, they represent a kind of bridge between what they expect the clients expect and what what we can deliver.
Yeah. Do you think it's going to be a stretch now for those who do build from the ground up? So, I mean, what I'm intending to do, I should explain this really, is that there's a sort of separate package, I guess, for the lower budget clients, where I'm going to just show them some ready-made templates that they can kind of select, and the promise is that it'll look different for their branding, and that we'll be able to move around. But there's a basic idea to get you started, which is exactly the opposite to what I would have done previously. So I'm effectively giving them the design ahead of time.
Yeah.
Do you think?
Go on.
No, I was just going to say, do you think that's going to be an expectation of clients, or do you think they'll still come with a blank slate and they'll just trust you on your portfolio of other work that you've done?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but let's put it this way. Every client that I've done a website for the last, I don't know, let's say it's 4 years or something, has been given a page builder as part of that process. And I cannot see those people now going back to a developer and saying, I would like you to build me a site, and I don't want to have any input into the way it works. I would like you to build it in isolation and present me with paper copies or PDF files or whatever, so that I can see what it's going to look like. I think all of those people are going to have the expectation that no, I want to be able to change that myself, because that's what I did on my last one. Goodness me, I mean, that's just what we've got. And I would imagine that the younger generation who've been taught in schools, modern IT practices and so on, they're going to have that expectation. They're using online services for just about everything: music consumption, creating documentation, Google Docs and so on. And the expectation, I think, for them, so going forwards, click, point, drag, save is going to be the way to do it. And I think that your processes have changed because the tools have, two words, allowed and forced. They've done both things. The page builder era has allowed you to make this stuff available to clients, and then as soon as it was available to clients, it's going to force all of them. Because I mean, people talk, don't they? They'll be in a cafe saying, "I need a new website," to their best mate, and they're, oh yeah, this is my website's really easy to do. I just click and change the text and click save. What, really? I have to keep phoning my developer to do anything. Oh, no, it's moved on since then. And I think that expectation will be how it is going forwards. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's just the idea of whether you actually put templates before clients or not, or whether that's a good thing or not. Because you've raised the point, we talked about this before, the fact that it'll be really difficult for us to sell the skills that we bring to the job if we already present them with something that already looks great, because it looks like, well, you don't have to do anything then. Yeah,
that is a good point. I mean, the other thing to say is, I suppose that depending on the client's budget or the size of the company, or however you want to frame it, that there'll be a different expectation. If you're investing $100,000 or $1 million in a website, you're going to expect everything to be done for you, bespoke. Maybe you've even got a team to input content, so it won't matter quite as much. But for the cheaper end of things, especially people who want to be involved in the creation of their own website, I think maybe that's different. That isn't really answering your question, I know, but there you go.
No, well, you just set me off with a thought, actually. I was just thinking about we've not done those kind of jobs, so maybe somebody who's listening in might be able to set us right on there. But I think, often when it comes to the bigger agency jobs where they'll expect it to be built from the ground up, maybe not so much that they need to build them from the aims, but they just actually need the whole organization to be brought into a system that will mean that they will agree on what's going to actually be built, so the process is perhaps more important than the design being linked to their aims.
I think the other thing to bear in mind with all of this is that just because something is easy for us to do because we're familiar with it and we've done it 100 times before, it doesn't mean that the client will make the connection, oh, this is easy for you, therefore it's easy, therefore it should be cheap. I'm not sure there's exactly a scale between those things, because again, if you put a user in front of Beaver Builder or Element or whatever, you say, right, great, off you go, build your website. I've supplied you with everything you need. You've got a WordPress installed, you've got a page builder, I've installed a few extra modules for you so you can style your contact forms and so on. Off you go. Absolute radio silence. They're not going to be able to manage it. So I don't necessarily think the industry is dead from that point of view. Certainly, it's easier for us to do. But then again, if you were a client, let's say that, try to imagine the situation where you are you're going to a web developer and you've never built a website before at all. And you go to two different web developers, one who sits you down and explains that the process is, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do it all in isolation. We'll give you all these wireframes. We'll send you a couple of designs and so on. And that's how it's going to work, which is the way that I would have done it 10 years ago, say. Or you go in and sit with somebody, have a Skype call or whatever, and they show you, well, we could have a header that looks like this. Here's like 4 or 5 to choose from, and we could, here's a couple of things that we could put at the top of the website. What about this one? Or no, look, we could change the font a little bit. I think there's some power in that, and maybe some competitive advantage if you are using a page builder, because who doesn't like choice? Who doesn't like to see things being built in real time? I do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is where I'm going with a bit of an experiment, really. I'm putting together these templates, and I'm going to go for one sort of particular niche at the moment to see what happens with showing them some, beautiful designs, ones that I've largely pinched and copied from other people. and then the idea is that we'll be selling them. Yeah, because I've realized for myself that there's actually a design skill in being able to manipulate these templates to the client's needs. And that's takes probably almost as much time as it does building it from the ground up. But the advantage is that I always feel that the client's trying to cut to the chase till they have the design before they will engage in it in the process. And then you end up using up all your time getting to that point. And then at the very end, they want to do lots and lots of revisions. And that's really at the point when you've come to the end of it. So I just think, well, reverse that and say, here's your design, and let's revise this into the aims that you want.
I think it's really interesting. It's a bit of a sea change, isn't it? Like you say, the design needs to be signed off before we start building the site, as opposed to let's say you've got 3 designs that you give to the client. These are like the finished designs, and once you've picked, as opposed to iterated upon them, then we'll just throw your content into that exact design. Yeah, it's interesting way around doing it.
Well, it's remember, I think the early debates on web design, which led to no speculative design, because there was an expectation for the client, in order to pick you to build their site, that it would see what you would build for them. So people were sending in, a homepage design for them. So this is what we will do for you. And they were selecting people on this. And I think the whole industry said, we're just working for nothing here if we do this. But in effect, I guess what I'm attempted to do is bringing this back in through the back door, really.
It's interesting. I think on some level, because we understand the tools and we realize that because we've played with them, it's easy. We have this kind of imposter syndrome or reverse snobbery in a way, where we think, oh goodness, I can do this stuff so much more easily than I used to be able to. Therefore, how can I possibly justify the cost of what I'm putting out? And you're right. That's not how we should be thinking. So, as an example, if you were an 18-year-old web designer, you're not going to be burdened with any of those thoughts, because you'll have been born into the industry with people already using these tools. You won't be thinking too much about the traditional way of doing it and whether you ought to do it one way as opposed to another way. You'll just go, well, this is the way to do it. These are the tools that we use. That's what my boss told me to do. Okay, fine.
Yeah, exactly. It's really fascinating. I just think, it changes the approach, though, doesn't it? Effectively, I'm flipping it upside down on what I've already, used to do. But I have learned, one thing I've really learned, just even though it's a new thing, building my own template library, is that you learn so much about the skills that you have. And you also learn so much by looking at other people's work and replicating certain elements of it. Because you go down your own path when you're used to your page builder and designing something, and you might take inspiration from various places, but actually building out somebody else's design and then changing it from there, you realize there are a lot of skills in it.
Oh goodness, yeah, the amount of times that I mean, I'm sure you can echo this, that you've seen a template that you think is perfect, and then you sort of start to play with it. So in our case, we're using Beaver Builder. We drag a page design in or something like that, and then you realize really quickly that amending the pre-built design is way more time consuming than just looking at it and trying to mirror some of the key points on that page, some of the key ideas, like, okay, that's a nice font, that goes well on the left as opposed to the right, and I like the fact that bit is made to be dark, and so on and so forth. I mean, we all know what I'm talking about. You just get cues from the design. Whereas if you install a template, you're then kind of stuck unpicking all the things that you don't like, and you have to go and find where is that thing being created. Where is that's an image. I thought that was I didn't realize that was an image. I thought that was some text. Okay, right, fine. And it's probably better to just take cues to the point where we were just talking before this started. In many ways, I think the best solution that I found is I've got two screens, is to have the template, if you like, or the layout that I like, that I've seen on one screen. Almost as if it's like a page, like on a piece of paper. There it is. I'm not interacting with it. It's just there for me to look at. And then on the other screen, I actually build something that I think mimics it to some extent. So it's just like flicking through a magazine, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know what? Another thing that's prompted me to kind of go down this path is just other comments I've heard myself and heard other people talk about in various groups. Things like, when they've had clients who said, well, I could go to Wix or something when they're getting a quote, and, they can see the beautiful sites there. And I think the general response for most people is, okay, you go and do that. And when you've got a problem, I'll see you later. But, if you've got templates there, you could say, well, okay, if your budget's tight and you want to do it there, we can start from our template library rather than go to Wix. And rather than have to wait for them to come back at some point in the future, you provide the solution there. I mean, it's not going to be suitable for everybody's business, but it's just a possibility to incorporate,
Yeah. The way that I always try to combat that, and obviously I'm successful sometimes and unsuccessful other times, is to talk about the adaptability of WordPress going forwards. The fact that if you run into a problem, there is a chance we can just amend something to make it work for you. Whereas with a platform like Wix, to greater or lesser extent, what you see is what you get. You'll just have to cope with the functionality that's built in and the way that functionality works, and it might work for you, but we can change it if it's not working out for you. Whereas if you go with a SaaS platform, that might be difficult.
Yeah, it's exactly the same as how I try and present it for anyone who's got the choice. But interestingly, one of the jobs that I have got started off on Squarespace. Now, I've done work for these people before, so they wanted it to come to me and go onto WordPress because there were other sites on WordPress. But this section of their company had already started the work with somebody else. But in some ways, I'm able to steal it now because they realize that they're going to have to do a lot of work to do the things that they want to do around an existing template they've got, where templates we can pretty much add what we like to with WordPress, where you can't quite with Squarespace. In their situation, you have to work. They have got an API, but it's only a JavaScript one, and you just can't add in kind of third-party add-ons, which they would kind of need.
Yeah, so the functionality is much more limited because it's only what they've got available. You're right, yeah.
Yeah, so we got those two benefits. I just think it's one of our weaknesses I felt of my business, particularly for the kind of client that I'm going for, which is kind of anyone, that I don't have something like this. And it's just really turned me into the idea that perhaps I should just be offering this to many of the clients I've built from the beginning, because really they just wanted to see the stuff. They wanted some design options,
Yeah. So when we talk about this, are we talking about templates being page layouts, or are we talking about templates being layouts for rows?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about more the whole design page. Largely a home page is about enough for somebody to get an idea of kind of Well, I guess as a way of sorting out what the client's taste might be as a starting point. And then at least when they're picking those, you could at least have a conversation about, well, does that actually match your brand and your visitors' expectations? But still, it's an easier conversation.
Yeah. So when you're creating your new templates, you're creating whole pages and saving those somewhere, as opposed to creating, let's say, 10 variations for a home page header, let's say, or a home page hero image location or something like that. So you'll create one consistent page and say, okay, that's one option for home pages, and I'll now go and do a different one. Okay, that's interesting, because I think there's like a bit of a move going on there as well. We've got all these layout template packs that are coming. That all the companies seem to be investing some money to some extent or other, and a lot of those are row based. The idea is that you just find a row which suits your current purpose. So there is a bit of a dichotomy there. Obviously, with rows you can create pages and save those away, but rows seem to be the way that I'm seeing the market developing as opposed to pages.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I've hit a kind of problem with those. I've tried to use rows and I was trying to sort of build them together, but you have to kind of almost make them wireframe-like to make them work, because you're going to have to style almost every element on those rows. So again, it doesn't cut out that main problem that the usual, I'll know what I like when I see it. And I'm just thinking, well, templates, as a whole bunch of that you have already, that how they're put together, allows you to say, well, okay, pick from these. And at least when you load that one in, you know exactly how it works and how you can manipulate it.
So speaking of like creating these layouts, rows, pages, whatever it might be, how are you actually achieving that? Because again, wind the clock back 10 years or something, you'd be using a software package to create these. You'd be maybe even hiring a third party, or giving the person in your company, the designer in your company, the job of making this, and they would give you a PDF or something, or a PSD, back.
Yeah.
Whereas now it feels like, certainly from my perspective, because this is fairly straightforward to do, a lot of this I'm doing in the browser, in the page builder itself, as opposed to in a piece of software designed for creating images or graphics.
Yeah, exactly that. When both of us are moving up into the browser, it's just something that we just move. Hardly ever do I need to open up a graphics program. Maybe if you want to just test some things out, you'll move backwards and forwards, but everything's going on in the browser. Image manipulation, as you do, I know. And the whole lot.
There's a couple of things that, my first point of call is I really do want everything to be in the browser. I mean that in terms of looking forwards. I want it to be that the browser is the way of doing everything. And if you're a Photoshop user, I want Photoshop to be available in the browser. That's what I mean by that. I'm not saying that we should settle for what we've got. I would just like the browser to be the tool for everything, because I just think that would be fabulous. But there's very, very little that I do that doesn't use the browser these days. I'm using WordPress to create the websites. I'm using online software to create the images. And obviously, if you're a designer, you'll probably gasp. But I don't have a if anything's going to be difficult, I don't do it myself. I give it to some trusted graphic designers who I know who can do that kind of stuff. But the limitations over the years for the browser being capable to do images are going away. But there's still a significant hill to get over. The browser image manipulation is very, very basic compared to what's possible with Photoshop or its equivalents. But for my use cases, I can mostly get away with what I need with online tools. And so, the browser is everything to me. So very, very rarely do I talk about wireframes. I was looking at a proposal the other day that I sent out many years ago, and I was looking at all the steps that I went through. So I would create like a wireframe. But before that, I would create, I've forgotten the word for it. What is the word for when you show what the page structure will be like? A sitemap. I would
Oh,
create,
yes.
yeah, I would create a sitemap so that we would see the hierarchy of all the pages, and when that was all signed off, I'd then move on to a wireframe and kind of wireframe a typical selection of pages and so on. I've really stopped doing that now and kind of go straight in on, okay, we're happy that there's going to be these pages, kind of a bit anecdotally. Okay, let's just crack on and make a homepage design and see what we like.
Yeah, yeah. And you kind of had to do anyway, didn't you? If you were going to build a site for people, you had to, if there's a group of people, you had to keep them away from the aesthetics, which everybody has an opinion on and talks about. And you needed to build up from the beginning. Let's get the structure. Let's get our aims, what content's going in, round those logics. And almost, you get your mood boards, you get the agreed sense of the sort of style. And then you would move into the design itself, the aesthetic design of it.
Yes.
Just to keep people off the wrong conversations. And you almost had to do that because of the cost of building and laying out individual pages in code each time. Page builders have killed that, haven't they?
Well,
kind of overnight.
Yeah, it just feels to me like the things that I used to use graphic designers for, I can largely achieve myself. So the idea of having to wait on a graphic designer and doing 2 iterations, and it was utterly uninteractive. It's been a long time since I built anything like that for clients.
Yeah. So I think really we're really sold on the idea of you doing everything in the browser.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely, 100%. That's where I'm going, and I can't see that changing anytime soon.
No, and I'm going to the other side of trying to get clients involved in some part of their design process that they want, and that's kind of stretched out. I mean, recently there was Get Stencil, which we both use. They introduced, and I'm sure there'll be more of this, a plugin to link their services with WordPress, which allows now, because it works with the page builders, a client can easily go in and select from the millions of free images out there to use some sort of stock imagery in their sites if they want.
Yeah, and that's a lovely little plugin. I must admit I haven't installed it inside of WordPress, but I've used the Get Stencil SaaS app. It's quite nice. Yeah. I use a different one. I use one called Pixteller, which has layers in more in a sort of Photoshop type where you can actually see the layers and you can drag the layers up and down. And whereas Stencil's a bit more, you have to sort of click up, and then eventually you'll figure out where it goes by the way it looks. But it's not perfect, but it's okay for now.
Yeah, absolutely. We haven't talked about the and there's new services. There's more kind of cloud templates appearing now. Obviously, some of the page builders have got those built in. So we've got Breezy has a cloud. I think Elementor has its own set of templates which are available, aren't they, on the cloud?
Yeah, and this is, to me, this is a litmus test of where the industry's going, because obviously, companies like Breezy, Elementor, and Andrew Palmer's Page Builder Cloud, they're not going to be doing this stuff unless they perceive that there's a market for it. So it feels to me that saving stuff off, looking at people's templates, buying other people's templates, saving your own somewhere so it's reusable in the same page builder, or in the Page Builder Cloud's case, you can go to whatever page builder and store any kind of layout in there for yourself. That those businesses are growing up because that's obviously where the market's going.
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly if you're going to take advantage, I guess, of the larger market, the one that theme forests, could claim because they had so many designs, you definitely want to go that way. For me, I still think why I'm building them myself, so I understand them, is so I avoid the problems that I had when I tried to use multiple themes. I'd have to keep relearning each time.
Yeah.
And I want a system where it's pretty much, I know as soon as I go into a client site after a number of years what is likely to be there.
Do you know, so there's this sort of proliferation of template packs, should we call it? The one that springs into my mind are things like Katka for Elementor by Barna Buxbaum, but also, a lot of the themes themselves. So Astra has got its Astra sites, and GeneratePress has got GeneratePress sites, and so on and so forth. And I'm sure there's an abundance of this stuff. Then do we know what the guidelines are in terms of what you can get away with? So as an example, with Astra, you can, the way that they've got it set up is if you're a Astra theme user, you can click a button if you've got their, I can't remember what it's called, Pro Sites or something. You can click a button and basically import a whole site from templates, and it'll do all the pages in one click. Is that allowed? Are you allowed to do that? I mean, that would be incredibly lazy and ridiculous, but would you be allowed to do that?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I've set these, and the other thing that goes with the Astra sites is they've, in their same package, it sounds like a plug for them, but they've got a WP portfolio, I think, as well, which actually means that you can show all of their sites which are unbranded. So if you wanted to start up in web design tomorrow, you can just import this portfolio with their templates, set up your page. And I'm using this, on some kind of hidden pages on my site and really you've got all of this big portfolio overnight, and if you wanted you could click and have them all imported. But I think there's a downside to it all. It sounds wonderful and it works, but again, you didn't set them up, so to a certain degree it's a little bit like the same as setting up a theme, isn't it? It's going to be very quick.
Yes. It's going to be quick to import it. Going to be click to import it.
Yes.
Ka-ching. But also you'll then be spending ages unpicking all the things that are not quite to your liking, because one of the things that I noticed about those kind of things when I first started playing with them, let's say, for example, the theme is all in orange and your client's got blue as their main color. A lot of the stuff is based upon images. It's not done on CSS selectors, so you'll suddenly discover that person is really wearing an orange hat in the image, and it is the exact orange of the branding that they've got. And that I don't know, that bar that you can see halfway down the page is orange, but that's also an image. So you're gonna have to swap all these things out and create the images. So again, it comes back to the whole thing. Use it as a point of inspiration, not as a quick way to get a site up in 4 seconds.
Yeah, and there's one other thing that I've noticed as well. Of course, all the page builders are developing it over time, so there are different ways to achieve certain effects which are going to change over time as well. So when you're looking at some of these older templates, they're not going to be up to the way that you might want to do that now. So it's more the reason why I think, building my own template library seems the way forward for me. I could completely change my mind on this. I've changed my mind a few times, but scary, I think, that really somebody in a couple of days can just set up a new web design business using these kind of tools.
Yeah, interesting. Libraries. Very, very easy to do, but not necessarily the best way of doing it. Like I just said, I think the best way is to use these templates as an inspirational springboard, and then teach yourself how to do the more difficult work of replicating it and modifying it and applying fonts and getting the padding right and the margins right and selecting your own images which work in the space that's provided and so on. So what are your sort of reasons? Are there any other kind of things that you think you will benefit from by forcing yourself to create your own library?
Yeah, I'm learning from doing it. That's largely it. I just think I will reuse a lot of this stuff for any project, but I think over time you're going to build up a good series of designs to show off to people, because I must admit, this is one of the difficulties with what I do. If you allow clients to change the sites, then you really don't have a portfolio. So having your own set of kind of designs that you've got ready designs. In fact, I've stopped calling them. I went over a landing page which I made, which I referred to things as templates, and I realized I'm just going to refer to them as starter designs.
That's a good idea. That is a good idea. Just designs in general, not even starter, just designs.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going from this angle. So I just think it's really handy, and I think it probably is easier to consume than, say, some live sites that we've actually done, because then they were compromised where these designs are not.
I do think the teaching point is good. You know, even if, let's say that you were starting out in web design, you've never done this before, and you selected a tool, let's say Breezy Element or Beaver Build or whatever, and you decide, okay, I've spent some money on that, I'm now going to learn how to use it. Just spending a few days trying to copy some of the templates that you've come across. Okay, right, I'm going to start with blank. I'm going to try and make that exact page. And quite a few people have done that with page builders just to demonstrate what the page builders are capable of. You know, they've gone to a whiz-bang website on the internet and they've said to themselves, okay, I'm going to do a YouTube video explaining how to do X site with Elementor, and they've pulled it off. And you know, you look at the two results at the end. There's the original, there's the one in the page builder. Okay, they look very similar. Job done. But also they've learned a ton in the process. They've learned how to use their tool of choice, where all the menu options are, and as a result, they've become quicker at doing it than they were before.
Yeah. Well, my wife's got the job now of trying to do exactly what I'm doing, trying to recreate. And I think it's going to be a really useful learning tool for her. And I guess you could do that as well, you know, if you employ people or you've got, staff of your own in your agency and you've got a bit of downtime. What better way to be building up your own kind of library?
Is this so that you can just put your feet up?
Yeah, that's the idea.
So that you can just say to your wife, please, would you do this? Because now you have the skills and I fancy going out onto the balcony and having a gin and tonic.
Exactly. Yeah, all I want to do is to just move one arm with my whip every so often.
Oh, dear me. Oh, dear me. I think we should end it there, to be honest, David. That sounds like
I do. She's back in the
place.
room.
Yes, time to move on and pretend that we were talking about something entirely different. So the answer to the question, should we use templates more? I think my answer is not a one word. It's going to be use them as an inspiration, but then do it yourself. What about you?
Yeah, I think that sums it up. And I think, I think it's a good idea to build up some kind of library, particularly if you've got some downtime, even if it's just for the practice. So yes, I'm a big fan of it, obviously, because I'm doing it.
Great. That's the perfect way to end it. Right, we'll knock it on the head right there. Right, that's it. Thank you so much for listening to another WP Builds podcast. We will, of course, be back next week, having another podcast episode, probably an interview, because we like to rotate them, discussion with David, and then interview the following week. We'll also be back on Monday, twice in fact, because very early in the morning I will be releasing the WordPress Weekly News, which is an audio podcast, but you can access the show notes as well if you want to see what the news items being discussed are. But also at 2 p.m. UK time in the WP Builds Facebook group and various other places, you'll be able to see the live news where I'm joined by a selection of WordPressers and we discuss the news, and it's quite good fun. You can access that. Actually, probably the best URL is go to wpbuilds.com/live. The WP Builds podcast was brought to you today by WP and Up. 1 in 4 of us will be directly affected by mental health related illness. WP and Up supports and promotes positive mental health within the WordPress community. This is achieved through mentorship, events, training and counselling. Please help enable WP and Up by visiting wpandup.org/give. Okay, that really is all that I've got for you this week. I hope that you enjoyed it. Please, as always, leave some comments somewhere, anywhere, somewhere, and we'll see you soon. I'm going to fade in some terribly cheesy music and say bye-bye for now.